My mom abandoned me at my grandparents' house when I was 8 years old because her new family needed a home. But now I ask them to leave my house. Let me start by saying that I was expelled by my mom because I needed to impress her new husband. Well, if expelled seems a little harsh, we can say that he took me out of my own house and made me live with my father's side. I have all the good memories until my dad was alive. Unfortunately, we lost him when I was 7 years old. As a child, I felt devastated. I was very close to my dad, and burying him broke my heart. I remember that moment very clearly, and it saddens me to this day. While I was still processing the loss, my mom showed up with another man and insisted I call him dad. I was like, no way. I don't know if I was right or not, but it just didn't feel right calling him dad just a few months after my own father's death, which I now think was too quick of her. After that first encounter, I often found him in my mom's bedroom. It was hard to see how fast my mom had moved on. She didn't even wait a year before bringing my dad's replacement home. I wasn't ready to accept it. I had just turned 8 when they planned their beautiful wedding. They organized a pretty big wedding for their second marriage. It's none of my business anyway. She left me with my grandparents while she went on her honeymoon. A month passed, but she didn't show up. I kept asking my grandparents when mom would come to pick me up, but they had no answer. Then, all of a sudden, she showed up one day. I was so excited to see her after so long. I ran to hug her, but she had brought all my belongings to abandon me at my grandparents' house. I was devastated, to say the least. I lived with my grandparents until high school. I was happy with them. My mom used to show up sometimes just to tell me how much she loved and cared about me. Sometimes I used to question her why she had abandoned me at my grandparents' house if she loved me so much. I had no answer. She would try to cover it up by saying, "Oh, your brothers are getting old. They need a hand to do the shopping and take out the garbage." It was much later when she admitted the real reason. She had given my room to her husband Bill's children. Mom's husband had 2 children who moved into our house with Bill after their wedding. Mom prioritized her new family over me. It was natural for me to resent that, so eventually, I stopped bothering her. After high school, I left my grandparents' house but visited them often. They were like saviors for me. If it weren't for them, my childhood would have been ruined. I am now 24 years old. After working a year in marketing, I thought about starting my own business. I needed capital for that, so I thought about selling my house. Oh yes, I didn't mention it before. There is a surprise for Mom and her loving family. Actually, the house they live in belongs to me. Yes, it is mine. My dad made a will on his deathbed and left me every last penny he had, including the house. I was a child when the lawyer read his will after his funeral, but from the expression on my mother's face, I can safely say that she did not like it at all. I later learned that she tried several times to annul the will, but she lost each time. My father had made a very precise will, establishing that the house would be mine, but I could only sell or rent it after I turned 21. Until then, no one could touch the property. Dad probably foresaw Mom's plan, and that's why he made such a will. Otherwise, she could have manipulated me in my childhood to give her the house. Last month, I called Mom to let her know about my house painting plan, but I couldn't find my calls. This week, when I went to see my mom, I told them I was planning to make some extra money with the house. They had a strange reaction. I asked them what was going on. They said she may have to face a lot of resistance to evict the house because Mom's stepdaughter is pregnant with a teenager who has run away from her responsibilities. Plus, Bill has lost his full-time job and is working at a store in the afternoons, so they're basically in a bad financial situation. Now I really don't know what to do. I mean, I need that house too. Now I've given up my job and need capital to start my business. Update 1, as I said, my mom informed me that she and her family are going through a bad time, so they may not evict my house. I thought about letting Mom know about my plan and giving them a few months to rebuild their lives. I was thinking of giving a month's notice before, but knowing their situation, I thought about giving 3 to 4 months. As Mom wouldn't answer the calls, I went to see her at home. The house wasn't like before and neither was my mom. They both had a cold vibe. Maybe she had seen the reason behind my visit. When I saw myself at the door, she sketched a fake smile and half hugged me. Keep in mind we were seeing each other after a long time. Yes, she comes to visit me after I entered adolescence. Yes, I had become bitter towards her. Why wouldn't I? Even though we met after so many years, she didn't even bother to ask me how I had been. She wasn't interested in hearing from me. It was like, "Oh, you're here. It must have been something important that brought you to my doors." To please her, I said, "Oh no, nothing important. I just came to see you. It's been a long time." She smiled and said, "Clear." There was a wave of silence followed by another 5 minutes until I got up to leave. It was definitely unpleasant. I didn't feel welcome at all. Besides Mom, my pregnant half-sister was also at home and she also looked at me very badly as if I were there to cause some kind of trouble. For the time being, I abandoned the idea of reclaiming the house. I explored other ways to get the money for my business, but Mom crossed all the boundaries of narcissism. Last week was the 15th anniversary of my dad's death. My mom organized a small prayer ceremony in the church. As I was in town, I decided to have a decent ceremony, feeding the poor and giving away some gifts to underprivileged children. I invited my friends and relatives for prayer. I also emailed Mom inviting her, but I couldn't. When I traced the email history, I found out I hadn't opened it. This was my first email to her. I thought it had gone to spam or something, so I showed up at her house again. This time Mom wasn't home. My stepsister Brenda walked out the door with no greetings, just a direct question, "Are you back again?" "What's up?" I said I was here to see Mom. She said, "With the way she called you last time, you think she wants to see you again?" She said it so directly that I didn't understand what she said and blurted out, "I was to invite Mom to my dad's prayer ceremony." She laughed in my face and said, That was ages ago. You're holding on to that? I said, sorry, he was my dad and it's my business. Now you can check for a part 2 by pressing share and more. Update, my mom abandoned me at my grandparents' house when I was 8 years old because her new family needed a home. But now I asked them to leave my house. Part 2, I stood there like an idiot for a few more minutes and then left a note for mom on the table. I asked her to call me back. She called me back the next day and I told her about the prayer ceremony. She remained silent for a minute and then said she couldn't go because she had to take Brenda to a checkup. That was a failure. I mean, I could have said I would try, but she rejected it immediately. It was disappointing. I responded sarcastically, yes, of course, she's your priority. We're nobody to you. Good luck. I found that narcissistic woman and her bastard son. She was mad because I used that word. I said, why should I be nice to her when she was so nasty to me? I know she mocked my emotions to defend her. Mom said it was natural for her to get angry. You can't talk about the dead in front of a pregnant woman. You are as insensitive as your dead father. The moment she said that, I lost my mind. I yelled at her not to talk bad about my father. If someone is insensitive here, she has to be, considering the way she was talking about my dead father. She said, your father died 15 years ago. Damn, get over it, I said, clearly, as you did, in a matter of weeks or days, maybe. Who knows? You know what? You don't need to come. My father wouldn't like your prayer after seeing your true colors. I hung up the phone after saying this. That same day, I hired a lawyer and began the process of sending a legal eviction notice. It took the lawyer about 15 days to validate my father's will and send the notice to mom as expected. When the eviction notice came into her hands, she panicked. Apparently, she never thought I would go this far to exact revenge for not attending my father's prayer ceremony. I laughed at her message in the voicemail and blocked her. When she couldn't contact me anywhere, she showed up at my house. I wasn't there at the time. Oh yes, I am living with my grandparents again until I reorganize my life. My mother asked my grandparents to convince me to withdraw the eviction notice. My grandparents are quiet and kind people, that's why they didn't kick her out. They said they have nothing to say about it, it's my property, and I can do whatever I want. Fair enough. She didn't like the answer and blamed my grandparents for raising me as a real spoiler. I was smoking when she said that. I asked my grandmother why she didn't say anything to my narcissistic mother. My grandmother said, we don't want to mess with a woman. So I said, I want to mess, and now I'm not going to let them live in my house for another day. I gave them the eviction notice according to the country's tenant law. Although they are not tenants, they are not paying me any rent. Plus, I am the one who pays property taxes every year, so legally, I have the right to kick them out immediately. My grandparents are God-fearing people. They convinced me to wait, otherwise, I was determined to evict them at that very moment. The next day, I got a call from mom. I ignored her. She did the same with me when I called her. She sent me a message to talk, saying it's urgent. I replied I had to check my calendar to see if I would be at my house. This did not sit well with her, and she sent a long reply saying that I was trying to impose myself. What did I do with her 5-paragraph email? Nothing. That's right, I didn't respond. Maybe she got the hint that I wasn't going to give in to her pressure. During my childhood, every time I cried or threw tantrums to go home, instead of comforting me, she scolded me and asked me to behave. She scolded me for being a good guy and not throwing tantrums. This was her parenting style, and it worked to keep her happy and not messing with her. I would stop sobbing, but after she left, I would stay in a corner of the house for hours. No more. It's time for her to be alone, but sadly, she won't have a corner for herself alone. So she came to see me, and I deliberately made her wait for an hour. I was anxious. I asked my family to stay out of it. She kept asking them about me. They said they didn't know and told her to wait in my room. When I came to see her, she looked at me like, well, where were you? I've been waiting here for an hour, but she said nothing, absolutely nothing. She sat there with a serious face. People in her situation would have tried to please me, but she stood firm in her arguments. She said, well, let me start. I can't sit here forever. I've got things to do, I murmured, of course, finding a house is a hard job. She looked at me upset and said, what is this notice about? I am sure you can read it or want me to read it for you. She was absolutely furious. She threw the notice in my face and said she wasn't going to evict the house for something as stupid as a notice. After I got out, I said, so let's wait and see the repercussions of not following the court order. She said, I gave birth to you. Don't try to be smarter than me. That house is my husband's and mine, and no one can get me out of there, I said, surely a legal heir can, to her provocations calmly to annoy her, and I succeeded. But the moment she referred to my dad as her husband, I lost my mind. You seriously have the audacity to call him your husband when you skipped his prayer ceremony, saying it was history. He doesn't deserve his house. You're just an illegal occupant, and I'm going to rid that house of all the parasites. She got up and said she had finished being nice to me and now she would have to deal with her lawyer. I laughed and said, clearly, go ahead. We still have 20 days left. Let's see what he pulls out of his sleeve. Update 2, I got the house after much conflict. As I mentioned in my previous post, I gave mom and her family a 30-day notice to vacate the house. She came to me and tried to distort the whole situation. I stopped her and left. The next series of events was nothing more than pure narcissism on their part. Can you believe that her stepdaughter Brenda came running up to me and, on top of that, threatened to file a harassment complaint against me? She was leaving her pregnancy victim letter as if to say, I can do whatever I want because I have a child inside me. I said, woman, pregnancy is not a pass to get away with everything. She tried to mess with me until we showed her the cameras set up around the house. I said, if you set foot here again, I'm going to have you arrested. Then my mother came to defend her beautiful stepdaughter. She accused me of mentally abusing and torturing a pregnant woman. Brenda said she was going to sue me for this. I said clearly, let the judge decide. According to the camera footage, when she couldn't let off steam, she calmed down, started sobbing, and said, I was wrong to raise you to become a selfish person. She started blaming herself for not raising me properly. In fact, she put my late father in the middle and said it was her fault for dying so early and not giving me a proper upbringing. And I told her. Now you can check for a part 3 by pressing share and more. Update, my mom abandoned me at my grandparents' house when I was 8 years old because her new family needed a home. But now I asked them to leave my house. Part 3, my mom started blaming herself for not raising me properly. In fact, she put my late father in the middle and said it was her fault for dying so early and not giving me a proper upbringing. I said, wait, if anyone is to blame, it has to be you. Not for raising me badly because you never raised me. I was raised by my grandparents, and they did pretty well. You should feel bad for leaving me. But you know what? I'm glad you didn't raise me. I see how badly you raised your stepdaughter. I touched on the subject of teenage pregnancy. I know I shouldn't have made a moral judgment, but at the moment of anger, I did it naturally. She was mad at me. I realized I had crossed the line and kept quiet. After that, I said I didn't want to keep talking. I just wanted to get my property back. I have allowed them to live there for free for so many years. Now I really need it. I tried to make her understand my situation, that I quit my job and needed money to start my business, so I would be renting the house. She was angry because I was kicking them out just to let other strangers live there. I said the other guys would pay me rent. If you agree to pay, you can live there. She was mad because I was putting money into family affairs. I said, there's no family here. You threw me out like trash and barely cared about me. My birthdays, Christmas, you just showed up, and when you did, you made me feel like you were doing me a favor. What kind of mother does that? A mother like you, right? She tried every means to manipulate me, emotional manipulation, making me feel guilty, and her usual fits of anger. When she understood that I was not giving in, she left. You guys are thinking they evicted the house after that? They didn't. Mom's husband still had to come on stage. That asshole sent a voice message saying, friend, you don't know who you're messing with. I can visit you and make you beg for your life. A slap in the face and you'll forget about the house. If you keep doing this, I'll knock you out. That guy is big and loves to show off. I don't know much about him, but my friends warned me not to mess with him. He's a bully. Of course, he is, but he's also a fool. He presented evidence against himself by threatening me via voicemail. I did not respond because I wanted someone older to take care of him, the police. On the alleged eviction day, I went to the police station and recorded a case of threats. I had solid evidence. My lawyer accompanied me to the police station and asked the police to accompany us to the eviction. Initially, they were not willing to come. They said, call us if they cause trouble, but we don't want to deal with the squatters on our own. Some cash helped convince them, and they accompanied us. When I got home with my lawyer, Mom, Bill, and Brenda started insulting us. Even her husband ended up with a field hockey stick. But as soon as they saw the police vehicle behind our car, they backtracked. The cops showed them the eviction notice and asked them to leave. They were so sure they weren't going to leave they didn't even pack their things. They asked the cops to give them a month longer. The cops looked at me, and I said, no way. After all these threats, they started using Brenda's pregnancy to get a few more days. But I stood firm and said, no. I got some strange looks from the cops, indicating that I was insensitive, but I was following the legal path, so no one had the right to give their opinion. Then they tried to negotiate to give them another day. I said, 3 hours from now. They looked at me with bitterness. Bill even tried to convince me with hateful eyes. The cops insisted on moving more packing and less looking. We all left after that. The cops asked them to hand over the keys to the police station from where I would pick them up. We had to pay the cops extra to make this easier, but it was completely worth it. Who wants to deal with those illegal occupants? My lawyer suggested that we apply for a restraining order on the property in case they would like to return and harass me or the tenants. I filed it, and the police gave them a copy of the restraining order and explained the consequences of violating it. The meanness in their faces was evident and end. I finally got the house and have put it up for rent. I hope to get a good deal and be able to start my business as soon as possible. Enough dealing with those despicable people. Update 3, after some time, I finally managed to find tenants for the house. It took me time because I had to do some repairs, but they were delighted with the place and signed the lease agreement smoothly. I thought that I had finally left behind all the problems related to the property, but it seems that things were not going to be so easy. A few days ago, I received a call from my new tenants. They were visibly distressed and informed me that someone was trying to force their way into the house. At first, I thought it was an attempted robbery, but when I arrived at the place, I was shocked. It was Bill, my mother's husband, who was trying to get the tenants out to take possession of the house. When I confronted him, he became aggressive and began to shout that the house belonged to him and that he had the right to live there. I tried to calm the situation and explain that he no longer had any rights over the property, who even had a restraining order from the house, but he refused to listen to reason. The situation was about to get out of control when neighbors arrived, alerted by the commotion, and called the police. The police officers arrived quickly and tried to mediate the situation. However, Bill became even more aggressive and began to insult the officers. Finally, when he tried to resist arrest, the police officers had to subdue him and arrest him for violent conduct, breaking down of private property, and non-compliance with the restraining order. It was a relief to see that the law was finally on my side without having to pay and that Bill would receive the consequences of his actions. The tenants were a little worried about everything, but they were also grateful for the police intervention and were able to continue living in the house without further interference. I know what he did is wrong, But with all the charges he has, I think things are going to be a little complicated for him. He has several charges, some where the police themselves are witnesses, so at least he's not going to bother us for a while. We'll see if he's such a bully when he spends time in jail. Update 4. My mother came to my house to talk to me and was lucky to find me because I've already found a cheap place to move to so as not to bother me anymore. With the money I get for my house, I can rent something and leave the rest to invest in my business. She wanted me to drop some charges against Bill, which I am sure I will not do. I don't know if I can, since the charges are actually filed by my tenants, although I don't know the legal details. The only charge I think I could drop would be related to the restraining order, but I'm not going to remove it either. To say that my mother didn't like this answer too much is an understatement, but it's not that she can convince me of anything. She said that now everything was going wrong for them and that I shouldn't add any more problems, but none of that convinced me. I know some will say I'm very hard on them, but I certainly think I did enough. I gave them a month to leave the property or pay rent, and they didn't like either option. The only thing they would have liked is to let them continue living for free, which wasn't going to happen. They did until now, so I think that's just what I'm asking for regarding Bill. In total, the charges have a sentence of 12 years, but that's only if he is given the maximum sentence on the charges, which I doubt will happen, although he does at least get a few months in jail with some interesting colleagues. Maybe when he comes out, he won't be as aggressive as he is now. You see it here, we do upload the full stories and in order. Follow us.